Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
It's funny we had mentioned that I work with Dr. Rothwell. One of the weakest points that we have in our organization is sales. We none of us can sell. And well, let me take that back. I don't think we know all the dynamics that are required in selling, because selling isn't just here, buy my product, right? There are a lot of these different critical competencies that are important for that. And part of that is being able to know the product and all the things that you're talking about. Let's talk about those competencies that are important to be a good salesperson. What are the most critical competencies that you see are most important for sales professionals in any field?
Okay, so first of all, communication, that's kind of a given, but I think if you delve a little bit deeper into what we mean by being a good communicator, it's kind of what I already mentioned, not only being able to talk, but being able to listen. And, I think of this one slide that I have in my PowerPoints. We show the first week of class, and that is this big ear that we need to listen 80% of the time. You've heard of the 80-20 rule. We use it in a lot of different venues, but in this case, we need to listen 80% of the time and talk 20% of the time. So if your buyer or your prospect isn't talking more than you, then you've got the balance wrong. So I think, one of the things that we teach students is before you start talking about your product, you have to go through the needs discovery and find out what they need. And that's a lot of asking questions and getting the buyer to talk. So communication skills, I think, is number one, but knowing the balance of listening and talking. And I think also, which I already mentioned, self-motivation. You have to want to succeed because this is your own business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of HR Next, Unpacking Trends and Talent Innovations, our monthly dive into the evolving world of human resources. I'm Lean Zalero, and I'll be your host today. I'm excited to introduce to you our guest speaker today is Michelle Welliver, the Department Chair and Associate Professor of Communications at Susquehanna University. Dr. Welliver developed an interdisciplinary professional sales minor at Susquehanna and 2 sales major. She is also the sales program director. She organized and directed the first high school sales competition, and she'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here. Why don't we start off with your foundational background? Let's talk a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit more about you. That was a really short introduction. If you could just share a little bit more what you are doing, where you got your program, where you graduated from, because I know you came from Penn State as well.
Right. So first of all, thank you for having me. So I worked in sales for many years, about a decade or so, in media sales, both radio and TV. Had gotten my master's degree. And while I was selling, I was also teaching at a local university, Bloomsburg University, and decided that that was something that I really loved. So I continued to sell, but also to get my PhD, which I did at Penn State.
Yahoo.
And yes. And so from there, I transitioned to Susquehanna University as a professor, an assistant professor, now associate professor. And I have the good fortune of being able to teach not only advertising and communications classes, but also professional sales classes.
And you were talking a little bit earlier before we got online was about how you do this with a high school, the program that you're doing with a high school. Can you share with me a little bit more about that? That's interesting.
Sure. So when I got to Susquehanna 8 years ago now, one of my charges was to try and develop the same strength of sales program that we had at my former university. And so about 4 years ago now, we developed the sales program, and our first big event was a high school sales competition.
Mm.
And we really did it that way because it serves so many purposes to get high schoolers here on campus. And we thought that it would be maybe a little bit more low level than a university competition to start out as our first competition. But we had such an overwhelming response that we have continued to do it for the past, this will be our 4th year. We do it every spring during our spring break.
Oh,
And I think for us, it gives high school students a look at our university. It helps us to be able to show the strength of our programs, our faculty, our facilities. And we get students from, we limit it to Pennsylvania, and we
okay.
get that are local, and we get students from, hours away. So it's a really great event where we can teach high school students about the value of learning about professional sales, because it can be a wonderful career.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but this is a podcast about HR and talent. So can you kind of share with the audience, what does sales have to do with talent development or HR?
So I think something that's really important is our program, our sales program, and most university sales programs work hand in hand with sales leaders in industry. And we try to get them as partners to come
Mm.
in and act as buyers when we do role plays in the classroom, to just, act as speakers to tell students about all of the different industries that you can have sales in, and that can be a really lucrative career. But I think where HR and sales intersect is we have to be very mindful as sales leaders that HR understands what we're looking for. And I think it
Mm.
starts with hiring the best and the brightest. And if they don't understand what we're looking for, then it's kind of difficult for them to hire the right people. So I think we have the misconception that salespeople are good communicators, and that's kind of it. What we know as we've developed these curriculums at the university level is that what practitioners are looking for, what sales leaders are looking for, is students that understand not only communication, but that they're self-motivated, and, because this is a business, really you're an entrepreneur, and that they're resilient. So, when they get knocked down and get all those no's, that they can get back up again. So I think there's a lot of things besides that communication aspect of it that we need to be telling our HR departments and collaborating with them, and having them understand what we're looking for. And then from there, that they're on board with the training, the ongoing training that's necessary to keep and maintain a successful sales force.
Great point. So, they've talked a lot about how a lot of these sales skills are really important. Can you kind of talk a bit more about like how can the HR team collaborate effectively with sales leaders to create more robust development programs for the sales team and its members so they recognize what the needs are?
So I think one of the things that sales leaders tell us as educators is we love that students already know how to sell,
Mm.
right? We're teaching them the theory, and then we're allowing them to practice that through role plays. So they hit the ground running, right? They know about, rapport building, and, presenting the product, finding out the needs, presenting the product, closing the sale. So what HR and the sales leaders in industry are doing is they're then teaching them product knowledge, right? So that's something that they don't know coming in. So product knowledge, and then those kind of building on, the strengths that they already have, and then pinpointing the weaknesses and building on those. So we need to, like I said, hire the best and brightest that have kind of that overall set of skills that we're looking for. And then we need to pinpoint, what we need to improve with each individual. And in some cases, it's not a team thing. It's what the individual needs. And so we might have, a group of salespeople who need to learn how to close better. And we
Mm.
might have another group that needs to learn how to handle objections. When I was in sales, one of the things that I was consistently told, and you'll probably find that out through this interview, is that I talk a lot. And I needed to learn to listen more, right? So I had great communication skills, and, I could carry a conversation, but I never knew when to stop. So there's lots of different individual skills, and we have a lot of different tests that we can, give salespeople to understand where they are, where they do have weaknesses, and we can, help them build them into strengths.
It's funny we had mentioned that I work with Dr. Rothwell. One of the weakest points that we have in our organization is sales. We none of us can sell. And well, let me take that back. I don't think we know all the dynamics that are required in selling, because selling isn't just here, buy my product, right? There are a lot of these different critical competencies that are important for that. And part of that is being able to know the product and all the things that you're talking about. Let's talk about those competencies that are important to be a good salesperson. What are the most critical competencies that you see are most important for sales professionals in any field?
Okay, so I mean, first of all, communication, that's kind of a given, but I think if you delve a little bit deeper into what we mean by being a good communicator, it's kind of what I already mentioned, not only being able to talk, but being able to listen. And, I think of this one slide that I have in my PowerPoints, and we show the first week of class, and that is this big ear that we need to listen 80% of the time. You've heard of the 80-20 rule. We use it in a lot of different
Mm.
venues, but in this case, we need to listen 80% of the time and talk 20% of the time. So if your buyer or your prospect isn't talking more than you, then you've got the balance wrong. So I think, one of the things that we teach students is before you start talking about your product, you have to go through the needs discovery and find out what they need. And that's a lot of asking questions and getting the buyer to talk. So communication skills, I think, is number one, but knowing the balance of listening and talking. And I think also, which I already mentioned, self-motivation. You have to want to succeed because this is your own business. You have a lot of time on your hands to plan and prepare and sell. And you can use that time wisely or you can use it unwisely. And so if you're not self-motivated, that's going to be an issue probably forever. And then also resilience or emotional intelligence. You're going to get a lot of no's, whether you're a brand new salesperson or a veteran, you're going to get a lot of no's and you can't take it personally. You have to dust yourself off and get back up again and go out there and ask again. Every students have to understand, and we tell them this, that every no is an opportunity, whether it's maybe you don't need my product or service, but can you recommend someone that does? Because we have this great relationship that we've built. And then knowing how to build relationships, understanding that you don't want to sell for selling's sake. It's not about transactions. It's about building relationships, right? So if you get that no, it doesn't close the door. You may have that opportunity to go back again. And every sales call should end with a next meeting or some sort of close if it isn't the sale, because relationship building is really important. So I think there's lots of things that I could probably go on and on about, but once we have you and we know that you have those general characteristics that we're looking for, then we can teach you how to negotiate. We can teach you how to close. We can teach you how to handle objections. But you have to kind of have that overall understanding of, kind of like those 4 or 5 basic things.
So, I don't know if you go to conferences or not, but a lot of times when I go to conferences, it always feels like somebody's giving me a sales pitch. And they kind of skip over the whole idea of that relationship building. Can you focus a little bit more about relationship building? How do we come across to people that, even though I do have a product or service that I think might be advantageous for you, how do I not come across like I'm doing some sort of sales pitch on you?
So you cut out a little bit there. And so I wondered if you could tell me exactly what you said again or repeat that.
I know for me, I immediately shut down. I'm like, all right, it's going to be a sales pitch. I don't really have that interest in it. But if I know that I have a product or service that may be beneficial for you, how do I come across to someone so it doesn't sound like it's a sales pitch and they automatically shut down? How do I build that relationship that you're talking about?
So what we teach, we have this rubric, right, that we show to salespeople, and it's what we use throughout all of our curriculum. And that is, first and foremost, you want to build a relationship before you even get into what it is you're trying to sell. So that is introducing yourself strong and confidently, and then building rapport. So understanding if I'm meeting with you, I'm going to do some background on you, right? We have all sorts of resources, whether it's the web or LinkedIn, to find out who you are, things about your company, so that I can start to build, a semblance of a relationship, right? And you will be excited that I took the time not just to come up to you and try to sell you, but to know a little bit about you. Because then you're going to say, okay, maybe she knows enough about me to understand that I might need what it is she's selling. So then from the rapport building, I'm going to transition into asking you questions about your company
Hmm.
that bring me to the understanding that you're going to need what it is I'm selling. And sometimes you don't need what I'm selling.
Right.
So if we can teach students that you need to take some time and build rapport, research your client, research the company, build rapport, and then ask questions. They feel like, oh gosh, I'm asking too many questions. I sound like a robot. But no, you're going to want to talk, right? If you
Right.
talk and I listen, then you're going to say, okay, now she knows enough about me that when she presents her product, it's going to make sense.
Right.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really do think that sales skills, these competencies to be an effective salesperson, is really important in any field that you're in. As an HR professional, when we're meeting with clients, even when we're looking to negotiate with the contracts, whether we're actually working within our teams, being able to sell them on an idea seems to be a challenge a lot. So these are really, really important skills that you're talking about. You mentioned the idea of also doing some background and checking. And as you stated, everything is almost available online. As a person who is both in sales or out of sales, what is this idea of this online presence? Because I know that once it's on the line online, it never goes away, right? And so there's all these different kinds of responsibilities. How do I effectively create a responsible, effective online presence that actually puts my best presence forward for other people when they are doing a background check on me?
All right. So as soon as we get students at the university, we tell them, clean up your social media, right? Because it never goes away. So, you want to make sure that you're now acting like an adult, and whatever that means, we try to let them still be, kids, but if it's your, you need to kind of, that's something that we don't want that on their portfolio, right? You don't put those social media, but if you've had your Instagram and you've done all sorts of crazy, things, leave that alone, but try to clean it up. As far as what we use in sales, we push LinkedIn. Um,
Hmm.
and LinkedIn, what we say to students is, you need to build that LinkedIn profile. We don't want that picture where you're half cut off and, it's you from a wedding. We want you to go get your professional headshot taken. And we offer that every semester here on campus,
Oh,
if
nice.
not somewhere else. But, and we have a career development center who is amazing, and they support that. And they talk to students one-on-one about how to make their LinkedIn profiles better. We also tell them, in addition to your education and your clubs and all of the wonderful things that you're doing and posting about, you need to be active on LinkedIn. So you need to be, following organizations that are going to help you in the long run in your career. You need to be posting things, right? So, or reposting things that show that you are building kind of expertise in a certain field. And I think as you transition into becoming a salesperson, you need to be sending things to prospects, not just about your business, but about things that would interest them, right? So if my business is, building automobiles, something about the automobile industry that I think would be really exciting for you, send that to you, right? That's called seeding, something that builds a relationship, but it's not me constantly pushing my product. So
Hmm.
talk to students about building that LinkedIn profile, making it look nice, and then being active on that as well. So not just posting things about yourself, but also sharing interesting information and liking interesting information as well.
So I'm really bad about updating my LinkedIn. I think the last time I updated it was maybe 3 years ago. It feels exhausting. It
Yes.
seems like that constant having to update and repost and post, do you have any suggestions on another way of doing it, or is it one of those things that you have to, put into your daily routines?
Yes. And I think for salespeople, one of the things we talk about probably halfway through, well, it's really close to the beginning in my advanced selling class, is that everything needs to be planned out your whole week,
Mm,
because you can't, you start to think, oh, I just need to prepare for these sales calls and I need to prepare these wonderful presentations for my sales calls. And then you forget about the prospecting. There needs to be hours of prospecting every day. There needs to be phone calls. There needs to be follow up. There needs to be training. So that needs to be planned out, whether it's weekly or monthly, blocks of time. And I would say the same thing for social media, right? Whether that's once a week, you don't have to post every day, but you need a block a week at least to make sure that you're active and people still know that you're out there. If I'm searching for you and I see that you haven't done anything, you haven't been active in 3 years, I might say, maybe she's not the, person I thought she was. So
right.
you,
Okay. I'll
unfortunately,
update my LinkedIn now.
unfortunately, that it goes hand in hand, right?
I know it. I know. Are there any other platforms that you think that's also important besides LinkedIn? I mean, there's Instagram, TikTok, all these other platforms that I completely stay away from. Are they valuable to get on and build relationships on?
I think they are, but I think it depends, right?
Mm.
So I have friends that are real estate salespeople, and they use TikTok a lot. They do videos of the house, right? And they go through room to room, and it's very exciting for them. They're young and fun, and they're getting, young new home buyers, to I don't know, to accept that and to think that that's really great. I think it depends on who your client base is.
Right.
We know that Facebook is for an older group. TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram is a bit younger. Instagram's kind of right in the middle. But I think as many online platforms as you can use that make sense for you, you should use. If I see your website, LinkedIn, Instagram, you might have a TikTok, you might have, I think the more you have, the better.
Wow. That takes an entire, it seems like it would take the entire time just to get those updated on a regular basis.
Well, we have, one of a job today that students are excited about is social media managers, right? So
Right. Right.
businesses, where we had an advertising or a marketing department, now we have our own departments for social media because it's just exploded. And if you're not there, people wonder why.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
gotta
And it's also across in all the different departments, even in HR, right? Because they also have a presence online, and they do start now directing a position specifically for that to be able to manage it, because it does take a lot of time. But it's a definite skill set that I am not very good at, and I know that based on what you're saying, I need to update and work on mine myself. But let's shift a little bit and let's talk a little bit more about some of these skill sets and the development and the assessment of these skills. And I want to talk specifically, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, it was about the emotional intelligence. So we're in this interconnected world, even more so now with social media. And it requires working in groups, with groups, virtually, face to face. These kinds of skill sets are really dependent on how well you do it to be successful. How do you approach teaching these specific skills to your students?
So for the online presence, like I said, we have a wonderful career development center, and they are always open to coming into the classroom. And so for my professional sales classes, I have them in a lot and I send students a lot. So, from building that resume to understanding how to talk to people, to understanding how to interview, I have a lot of students who just take my classes because they want to interview better, right?
Hmm.
So they're learning how to interact. They're taking those communication skills, those negotiation skills, and they're using them to get internships or interviews. But I think at the core of it is understanding how to build relationships, understanding doing what you say you're going to do. So whether you're doing it virtually or in person or on the phone, I think it's all really the same if you understand that the principle is that if you say we're meeting here and I'm going to follow up, then that's what you do. I mean, one of the things I tell my students in my principles class is it's okay to ask people, your clients, what is your preferred mode of meeting, right? You might want me to come see you in person because that makes you feel better. Another person might say, I just want you to call me. I don't need to want you to call me on the phone. And another person might say, I love Zoom or I love Teams. I want to see you, but you don't need to come all the way here, right? And
Right.
so you ask them, you understand what their expectations are, and then you can fulfill those expectations. I tell my students a story about when I was young in my 20s, and at my first sales job, I was selling radio ads and I was selling it to local businesses, and I inherited a list and then I had to build a list. So I inherited a partial list. So I was kind of going about my business, and I had lots of different advertisers. And one advertiser in particular, she owned a country store. She was probably one of our biggest local advertisers. And I would just call her and say, do you want to run the same ad? Do you want to, we have a new package. Do you want to do it? And she was yes, 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 yes. And one day she called my sales manager and said, I think I want a different sales rep. Michelle doesn't spend near enough time with
Hmm.
me. And it was because I wasn't going into her store.
Oh,
She wanted to feel like I'm special at this radio station. I come in, I do my own ads, and I lost that client. And you know what? I never lost another client because of
hmm.
that. So I decided that I needed to call to ask people, how do you want to be seen? What mode of communication? Because you don't want to leave that to chance. So in answer to your question, and I hope I answered your question, I think that it's more about understanding what the client wants.
Yeah, no, you mentioned something about understanding what they want as opposed to what we think they want, right?
Yeah.
And the whole idea of the golden rule: do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. But that's not what they may necessarily want. Like you said, I would prefer to meet on Zoom, but it doesn't mean that another person does. And sometimes I got to think and switch that position and think about what they want, not what I want. And I think a lot of times we take that place. We talked about the whole idea of relationship and communication and a little bit about negotiation. So these are all skills that are constantly having to be upskilled and reskilled. How do you instill in your students the importance, the critical importance of continuous learning and development throughout their careers?
I mean, we talk about that all the time. I have students who come to that first sales class and they say, not even sure why I took this course. I'm afraid that I don't have the skills for it. I'm not, as personable. I'm very shy or whatever. And we talk about that really anything that you want to build on, you can build on. I was lucky enough when I started out that first sales job as we were sent to a Dale Carnegie course,
Mm,
where we learned about, what's important. It was kind of a first level selling. And one of the things that stuck with me is learning about how a person's name is the most important word that they'll ever hear in their life. So know people's names, right? Know how to pronounce them and use them often. But you might not be a conversationalist. We can help you with that. We can help you learn how to, listen and respond better. You might not be great at negotiation, but we can teach you that. And so whether it's doing it on your own or doing it through work, we teach that that's a skill that you're going to have to continue to develop. So continuous learning is something that we often talk about in our sales classes because we can't rest on our laurels. Things are constantly changing. We're starting to talk about AI and how it can be beneficial in sales and how it can just be such a time saver in so many different uh, disciplines if you use it wisely.
mm.
We're still kind of scratching the surface about how you can use it, but we do. In answer to your question, we talk about continuous learning and sales. You're always going to be having to hone your skills. That's just a given.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
So you touched on AI. We'll get to that in a moment. what do you do yourself personally? You have a PhD, you've been in sales, you've done these. How do you continue to develop your own skills?
So I go to conferences. I do a lot of research on sales. I'm part of some different organizations, professional organizations, where we
Hmm.
talk a lot about it and brainstorm, whether it's other professors of sales or if it's just other professionals. So I try to keep my hand in that. When you're a teacher, it can kind of consumes you. So you put the students first and you want to spend your time. But again, that planning, you have to have time to develop yourself. And so I spend a lot of time on that professional development, whether it's through reading. I've got this list of books a mile long of books that I should be reading on sales and that I talk about in class, but also the conferences, the professional organizations.
Great. You had mentioned AI, and so we'll talk into that. I think for me, that seems to be the part that I've been spending most of my continuous development in, trying to understand and learn what these AI tools are and how do they work. Is it effective? What are some of the ethical conundrums around those things? In regards to sales, AI has great opportunities to be able to personalize to customer experience. For teaching, it also gives us the opportunity to also personalize it. How do you incorporate these new technologies in your teaching and in your other development strategies?
So I think at the most fundamental level, we use AI in simulations
Hmm.
where we have like these chatbots who act as the buyer, and you can present to them, and it gives you a synopsis of how you've done, and you could do it 10, 20, hundreds of times until you perfect it. There's a bunch of different simulations that you could choose from. Actually, not a bunch, but there are a handful of simulations. And then we talk about how we can, get information. And I've not really mastered the art of, how to tell students that they should use it for information, but not use it exclusively. Because we're seeing, unfortunately, students cutting and pasting from AI, and we don't want that.
Right,
But I think if we learned how to talk about it well, we could teach students that they could use it for data, but not use it, to the point where they're plagiarizing, right?
right,
Use it like they would any other resource, but make sure that they're, you know, um, making it their own or citing it or whatever. That's the problem. When we actually are looking for information in published articles or magazines or wherever, we're citing that information. With AI, we're not, and that's where the problem begins. So we have to teach our students how to use it the right way.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I teach a class here at Penn State, and some of the challenges is that very part that you're talking about, how people cut and paste. And a lot of the universities still don't have a set policy in regards to how to handle that and what to do. And I've told them, I said, it's great. You use it as a tool to brainstorm, but it has to still be your ideas. But then there's that blurred line. Where does it become your idea and it becomes AI's ideas? So it's a challenge in a lot of different spaces.
Well, it's
Let's go ahead.
even, oh, I'm sorry. Even Grammarly. Grammarly is used by a lot of my colleagues, and
Yeah,
really, I think students have caught on, and it's really changing what communication looks like, right? What their emails look like. It's no longer, "Hey, professor." It's a wonderful, well-crafted email that took them 2 seconds to write because
I know, but I worry about that though too, because are they now going to neglect the development of those grammar skills that you need to have to be able to, one, talk properly, speak properly, write properly? And because I don't have a Grammarly in my head right now, it would be great if I had that. But I think a lot of times some of these tools can actually cause more detriment in some development areas. And
I
I'm
agree.
curious to see what happens.
They go from texting where they're not even writing in full sentences to then trying to
Right?
figure out how to write, and then they discover Grammarly or something like that,
Yeah.
writing beautifully again. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the learning isn't happening. but they've got that instant gratification of those AI tools,
But I
unfortunately.
mean, like you said, emails are definitely much more professionally well crafted, and it's nicer to read some of these emails from some of these students. So I agree what you're saying. Let's go into a little bit more about the whole back to the sales idea and sales analytics, maybe about how these tools of AI, how does that influence the skill sets that you're needing to develop in these students? As you talk about, some of your students and you're developing their skill sets, what do they need to know about AI?
So I think most all of our sales partners use some sort of sales analytics for their salespeople. Some of them like Salesforce. There's a lot of different, and I think what our sales partners are telling us is, it's really easy. And, once they get onboarded, they get their client list, they can develop their prospects, and all of the things we're teaching them is right there on their dashboard, right? So
Mm,
it tells them that, you need to spend this much time prospecting. Here's your clients. If it's a former client, gives you all of the information that everyone across, the organization has inputted in there. So I think, a lot of my colleagues at other universities are incorporating like a Salesforce because they have one for teaching into their classrooms. We haven't done that yet. We use a simulation where we have that data analytics built in. But that might be something as we continue to grow our sales program that we incorporate. But like I said, it's pretty much different at every organization, but every organization has something like that
right.
where they know exactly what they need to be selling to a specific client, what they need to be saying, what they need to be doing, how often they need to be meeting, um, what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, it's exciting. That information, the power of AI for that kind of information is amazing. If we use AI for good, it can be a really great thing.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. So we've gone over several kinds of skills. We've talked about communication. We talked about negotiation, building relationships. You also mentioned earlier about how you really have to be able to know how to take a rejection. So can you talk a bit more about that? How do you adapt that skills of building team resilience or long-term resilience in yourself and with your teams when it comes to sales and you're getting all these no's?
So for me, I mean, having experience as a salesperson, I can talk about this and know pretty much that it works, and that is having regular sales meetings where we can all come together. There's nothing worse than thinking you're the only one that's experiencing what you're experiencing. And really in any experience in life, but when you hear that others are having the same, highs and lows as you, it can really motivate you to continue to do what you're doing and know you're doing okay. So in my advanced selling class, we actually have to sell stuff. So last year we sold, I'm really into sports. So we sold a sports packages for a minor league baseball team. So they were the minor
Oh,
league baseball team for the New York Yankees. We have them here in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania. So it was the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Rail Riders. And some students did really well and some students did really terrible. And we had to talk weekly in class as if we were, having a sales meeting about who was doing well and what do you think, was helping you to succeed and who was not, and what do you think you could do differently, and what advice do the others who are maybe, doing the same thing or doing, and that kind of just debriefing and talking about it and getting help from not just me, which I guess I would be the sales manager in this position, not just me, but hearing what others are doing. Yeah, I experienced that same no, 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 and here's what I did, and it helped. Or I'm not experiencing any no's, and here's why. Here's what I'm doing. So what we found in that class was a lot of people who were just getting on the phone and calling were getting no response, right? Or just
mm,
emailing or getting no response. You had to do it in a logical pattern, right? Call, try to get the person, send an email, and then try to maybe go in person or have a Zoom meeting or something like that. They were thinking that a quick phone call could be the answer, and it in most cases never was. So
right.
we that yeah, let's learn from each other and build that sense of community where we all understand that we're not in this alone, we're in this together.
That's fantastic. You also mentioned a little bit earlier about this competition that you do with your students. Can you explain a little bit more about what that competition looks like? I mean, how young are these students that are coming in? Are they high school, juniors, seniors? And what are the primary focus and what they're learning around these sales competitions that you're doing?
So we have a partner in the Pennsylvania FBLA, which is Future Business Leaders of America.
Yeah.
And so our contacts at the FBLA send our promotional document to all schools that are on that have an FBLA club, right? So first and foremost, we're getting high school students who are interested in pursuing a business major in college. So they're
Okay.
in their clubs. They're already doing the FBLA club things, which is they compete for, and there's, all sorts of different areas where they compete, but it's in marketing and sales is one. And so they already have an interest in business. This is something that we're finding that a lot of these FBLA teachers are the ones that are bringing their students because students are already used to competing. What they're learning is they're learning that in addition to, and when you think about the business classes that are taught at a traditional high school, that doesn't have a business focus, is personal finance, maybe an accounting class, maybe a marketing class, and maybe an advertising class. There's not a lot that goes into sales, right? Marketing is so broad that they hardly talk about it. So to introduce them to something like sales, which hasn't traditionally been something where people would think they need to go to college to learn about, it's been very kind of enlightening for
Hmm.
students. And when we talk about sales, I think it's important for us to tell students, whether it's at the high school level or the college level, we're not talking about, working in a discount store or, being a cashier. We're talking about business to business sales, right? We're talking
Right.
about you are, the an advocate for a business. You are the agent for a business who is selling to other businesses. And it's this more, complicated, intricate sales that we're trying to teach students about. It'll
Right.
help them in their part-time jobs at, the local discount store, but it certainly isn't what we're, you know, building their skills for. We're building them
How
for this.
many students do you normally get in those competitions per year?
We've gotten up to about 70, I think.
Wow.
I think we've figured out that 100 is probably our limit with our facilities to be able to handle and our volunteers. It takes a lot. It's a two-round role play. So we have the first round, everybody gets to participate in the first round, and then the top 10 students move on to the second round. But the way traditional sales competitions are run at the university level is the way we're doing it for the sales competition for the high school students. And so you have each student goes into a room with just a buyer, and then that's videoed on Zoom to a room of judges. So the judges aren't in the room. So we need
Oh,
5 or 6 competition rooms and 5 or 6 judges rooms. So we need lots of judges, lots of buyers. We need lots of runners to help us run it. So it takes a lot of people to run it. So we're not quite sure how many we can have, but we think 100 is our limit. But we've had about 70, I think, was our top.
now this is all face to face. There's no virtual parts of this.
It's all face to face. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think one of the nice things is they get to come to our campus, which is a beautiful campus, and they
Right.
get to see it. Unfortunately, they're seeing it when there's no students here, but we wouldn't have the facilities and the space
Right.
to do it if our students were in the classroom.
That sounds like fun. That's exciting. So, thinking about advice, let's think about a little bit of some advice. What advice would you offer to the students or young professionals, or even to someone like me that says, "Oh my God, sales, it scares me." What advice can you give to help people in regards to that whole conversation around sales?
Well, I think it's not as scary as people think. And there's a procedure to it. I think in my sales classes, I talk about it's a puzzle. And if you say the right things in the beginning, then selling your product will make a lot of sense. And we talked about this a little bit earlier on, but I think a lot of students come into a sales class thinking, I'm interested in it. I want to make a lot of money because I know in sales, the sky's the limit, but I'm not sure if I can do this. So
Mm,
we talk about that it's a process,
right.
and you learn the process, you can sell basically anything. If you learn that you have to ask people what they need and then figure out if your product will meet their needs, put those two things together and you can sell any day of the week. But we also talk about that it's a business and you have to be motivated. If you need someone to tell you you need to be at work at 8 o'clock, you need to go to lunch at 12, be back at 1, leave at 5, you know yourself, right? If you need that kind of guidance, then sales is probably not for you, right? It's your own business. You're essentially an entrepreneur, and self-motivation is key to being successful. But and you talked about, ongoing learning. If you don't have all those key skills that are important in sales, you can build them. You know what it takes. Good
Right.
communication, self-motivation, organization skills. We completely completely missed talking about that, but organization is another thing, right? You've got to plan out your week, your month. Every Sunday I plan out my whole week, and
Wow.
if I don't do that, if for some reason I miss it because I had a prior engagement, my whole week is kind of a mess. So organization is also key, but it's not as
Excellent.
simple as it seems.
Yeah, I always think that, the part that I know for myself that I have a deterrence to is the whole idea of always the no. If I want to try to sell somebody, the first thought I have, they're going to say no. So why? But if you go back to thinking about the skill sets that you've talked about, the whole idea of building that relationship, then it's not really selling. You're just kind of sharing with somebody what you know, and they might be interested in it. So I think
Right.
that's a better approach for a lot of things, for me at least, to go at it. Um, so we're approaching almost the end of this podcast. So I really appreciate your time. Let's focus a little bit more on the future really quickly. So where do you see the future of sales? Where do you see the whole idea with whether it's with AI or the idea of developing people? What does the future look like for somebody who's wanting to go into the sales area?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of torn about how I feel about it, but I think first and foremost, relationship building is always going to be important. And I know that people have said, oh, robots are going to replace us and they're not going to need us in sales, but I actually disagree with that. I
Yeah.
don't that will ever be replaced in this business. I think people want to talk to people, and bots can make us a little bit more efficient where we don't need those relationships. But I think, when we're prospecting and we're building new clients, I really think that not much is going to change in that regard, that marketing concept where we've moved from transactional selling to relationship building is really going to continue to be king. But I think that we're going to see more and more and more AI as we see these different iterations of it and what it can do for us. And I'm sure that it's going to be built into all of the CRM systems at, these sales um, related businesses.
Yeah, when we think about our team with RNA, I do know that the biggest gap that we do have is sales. And it's a skill set that our team hasn't planned on developing because we all think that we're knowledgeable on certain things and people should want to buy it, which is not at all the case. So I think sales is really important as a skill set for everyone, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur. It seems like everyone's going to become an entrepreneur these days, which is fantastic. But if you can't sell your product and your services, you're not going to do very well. And I do agree that it's the relationship part that's the most critical. I mean, I've met people like yourself right now that you're so personable and it's easy to talk to you. I meet somebody and they're like, okay, what do you want? Why are you trying to sell that to me? And so I'm not, I gotta definitely develop and work on that skill set. One last question I have for you. Are there any books, resources, even maybe some thought leaders that you recommend for anyone who wants to develop their skill set as a sales person or just develop the skill sets that's required and needed to be successful in being able to sell?
Oh my gosh, there's so many books out there. I think for me, it all started with the Dale Carnegie books, How to Win
Oh,
Friends,
okay.
Influence People, and all of that. I still have them on my bookshelf. Zig Ziglar's a good one. I would say that there's probably a ton of books and whatever appeals to you. There's quick reads, there's long books, there's certainly a lot of different things. But for students, what I tell them is to take part in these competitions, right? See if
Mm,
it's and a lot of students who never thought it was for them did competitions and did well and have gone on to have very successful sales careers. So there's a lot of resources for students to explore, whether it's going to these sales conferences, we have everything from role play, round role plays to just doing elevator pitches. So they can practice their skills in a variety of different ways.
that's exciting. The whole idea of these competitions and simulations I love that. And we're doing a lot of work right now in regards to simulations, but I think that idea of being able to get in front of somebody and actually try it, because it's actually me going, I'm not walking in that door to even try it, but having that, simulation and be in a safe space to be able to get some feedback to go, all right, well, you did this well and you did that well, and you could improve in this. I think it's fantastic for students. So that's exciting. So very cool. Thank you so much. So, any last words, comments, or suggestions that you have for people to be successful in the future, whether it's about sales or continuous development, relationship? Any last thoughts?
So one of the things I probably should have touched on earlier is we use a book in our advanced sales class called Spin Selling
Hmm.
by Neil Rackham, and it's an acronym, and it's a understanding how to go through the steps in the process. So I think that might be one, but I would say to anybody interested, it's a lucrative career, and you put in what you get what you put in, and so I would say to anyone, you should take a course or read a little bit about it. It was the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. And I think I transitioned into academia because it was a time in my life where it made more sense when I was having, children. But anyway, so.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for your time and sharing your wealth of knowledge. This has been a great conversation. And so, with that, this is a wrap for the HR Talk, Unpacking Trends and Talent Innovations. Stay curious, stay innovative, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now